industrial relations dominating this final week, of course. It was a drip, drip, drip until the boots landed, the changes to the Better Off Overall test. Michael, this seemed to put a bit of a spanner in the works. Even the PM was talking about, well, you know, everything's on the table for negotiation here. Do you think the government realised the fight it's in for by the time this week unfolded?
Look, they probably did, but there are a large number of small businesses out there, Tom, who are going to be affected by the aftermath of coronavirus for several years, and that's what the government was proposing, to give them some help over the next 24 months. OK, the union movement doesn't want to help. The ALP doesn't want to help, and I would expect the government's going to say, well, in those circumstances, we're not going to let the whole government agenda be diverted by another work choices campaign, which actually would be, you know, campaign based on a lie, because it does affect so few people. So I would expect the government not to proceed with that element of the legislation. They've had a good week already with the breakup of the big unions bill and affecting the CFMEU. So I think they'll probably drop that clause when it comes time, Tom.
So, Jim, your thoughts? Clearly, more and more as the week unfolded, the union movement and Labor were gearing up for a fight. It's such a complicated area. You know, I even find trying to ask a question of it, perhaps it's more on me than anyone else, but you tie yourself in knots trying to talk about the acronyms and who's affected and so on. It's who can mount a good, easy argument, easy to distill and effective and convincing with COVID that will win the day here.
Quite so. Good morning to you both. Look, quite clearly, I don't think the government realised just how potent the issue of no one being worse off would be as an issue for the Labor Party. Clearly now, even though, as Michael says, they will pull back from that, this does leave the Labor Party and the unions in a position where they can argue right through to the next election that we really know what the government wants to do, which is to cut your pay. That does cut through as an issue. Now, misleading in detail it may be, and complicated as you suggest it is, they have handed, in my view, the potential at least for a very potent weapon for the Labor Party and the unions leading into the next election.
Well, certainly that's going to roll on into next year. So, you know, the details finally came down. We'll see. I think they're going to both figure out their attack points for next year on that. I want to talk about this vaccine. Big news today. It's such a, you know, a dangerous foothold, if you like, for anti-vaxxers, this type of headline. It's going to be crucial, Michael, the government gets its messaging right on this, and you've got to include people such as Craig Kelly, saved by the PM in pre-selection, saying before this news came out that he was, you know, having concerns about vaccines in general and questioning the TGA authority. Doesn't he have to? I know everyone gets a free, you know, they're free to speak up. We know we talk about the Liberal Party, but does he need to be reined in? Can that be done by Scott Morrison and anyone else that wants to speak out? It's just not the time. You can have your own opinion, not your own facts.
Yeah, look. I think we're a highly educated society here in Australia, and I think we all know the importance of vaccines. We've been taking them since we were kids. In my case, in Jim's case, Tom, that was a long time ago. We started with, you know, polio vaccines, etc., etc. So, you know, Craig's entitled to his views. He's a very good man, but you're going to have backbenchers speaking out and questioning, you know, these types of developments, and that's healthy in the Liberal Party as it is in the ALP. I mean, they've got Fitzgibbon speaking out, so it's a healthy sign of democracy in a party where you can have people expressing alternate voices, particularly publicly on really sensitive issues like this. But look, as for the bigger issue, I mean, the government seems to have the vaccine quantities required covered of over 50 million doses. So the failure in Queensland, disappointing though it is, doesn't appear to have any material effect whatsoever on the immunisation of Australians by the new vaccine, the AstraZeneca vaccine, Tom.
But I mean, we've never had a focus on vaccines like this before. These are big headlines, and you know, we've been stressing it's a false positive for HIV. It doesn't affect efficacy. You said there it's healthy to have their own views. Can you really have your own view? Don't we need to be all saying, every MP, you know, the TGA, we have authority, we have faith in them. These are experts that delve into this. They've looked at the processes. Safety measures are taken. You can't just I'm just not sure you can have your own view on that in the same way you can have your own view on industrial relations.
Mm. Well, what if they're wrong on occasions? You know, no scientific body is immune from error. So, you know, have I got confidence in the TGA? Absolutely. The FDA in America? Absolutely. I mean, the regulatory approval processes that the Western world has set up in America, Britain, Australia, etc., has been Germany, has been one of the outstanding successes of basically modern medicine and the approval processes. But if other people have doubts, well, they're entitled to their views. They're not the views that I share. I'm sure they're not the views of the Prime Minister or Minister Hunt.
Jim, this will be a big test of such high vaccination rates. They're a badge of honour in Australia for a very good reason. You see some of the awful diseases that are flaring up in other countries, including in the US, and particularly ones that affect children. I just cannot fathom how people can sort of run these campaigns and see how they affect children, you know, things that should be eradicated in our society. This is a big test coming up, though, isn't it?
It certainly is. Look, I struggle to understand why people are so opposed to these things, but there's always been a section of the community, you can go back to fluoride, for example, as well as vaccinations of various kinds, where people have been opposed. You're never going to eliminate that tendency within the community. All we can hope is that the majority of us heed the lessons, understand what's going on, take the advice, understand that the consequence, the reason for, in part as I understand it from what I've heard this morning, that this has been aborted is because of concerns that they want to get it absolutely right. And there are alternatives, there will be alternatives, we're well provided for as far as this is concerned. This was new technology that was being tested. It doesn't mean the end of it as a possibility, but I do think that by and large, as long as the figures of authority within the community, from Scott Morrison through to the state premiers, through to the various health officials on whose advice we depended, and done so successfully as a community over this appalling winter that we have that we've suffered, and we're now emerging out of the other side, that the majority of people will do that, and that will be sufficient, let's hope, to make sure that come next winter, when no doubt the virus will still be around in some form or other, that we won't face another winter like the one we have just gone through, particularly in Victoria.
Yes. Well, let's just finish by reflecting on that from each of you. 2020 has been a heck of a year for Melbourne, Victoria in particular. Michael, I guess it's not all downside. You can be, you know, clocking in there for your shift on Sky News, beautifully presented on top and no doubt shorts and thongs on the bottom, so there are upsides. But how do you look back on 2020 at the moment?
Beats, actually, Tom. It's been, and I'm sure Jim will agree, we've never seen anything like it before. We'll never see anything like it ever again. Not in my lifetime. A curfew in Victoria. We were not allowed outside our house. This is wartime conditions. We had to wear masks everywhere. Businesses were closed. 800 people died, as we just saw in that report, particularly the tragedy at St Basil's. People were shocked at the infringement of civil liberties in Victoria, but in a health pandemic, people revert to what they know, which is the natural human instinct of reverting to need to self-protect, to look after themselves and their families, and they relied on the governments. Okay, the Victorian government were stuffed up pretty badly for all the reasons we know, but generally speaking, the response elsewhere was good. The leadership of the Prime Minister and Hunt was terrific. Some of the premiers did a very good job. Some were a bit extreme, but we've never seen anything like this again before, Tom, and we won't again. And I suppose the point is that now we must look forward to the economic recovery. That's the important thing. People's jobs are important, people's businesses are important. So the next 2 to 3 years are going to be incredibly challenging. But yeah, as I said, life surprises, and who would have thought? Who would have thought?
Jim, you might be looking forward to summer reading, given that it looks like a heck of a stack of books there, so a bit of beach time for you maybe, but what about you looking back at the year that's been?
Look, living in Victoria as I did, I'm just astonished and very pleased indeed at the way in which the community at large responded to the incredible challenge that was faced in the middle of winter come June or July. I've spent a little bit of time very recently in New South Wales, and it's like the pandemic never happened there in the way in which people are behaving. In Victoria, it seems very different. I go out to shops and cafes and so on, people are still almost automatically putting their masks on in many cases. Not because it's compulsory anymore, but because they've got used to it. So congratulations, I think, to the Victorian community in general for its response to this. Also, to in particular the work of healthcare people who have done a remarkable job in incredibly trying circumstances. Also to some of the other people working in places like supermarkets and so on, where they actually risked their lives to provide the necessities of life so that people could put food on the table. I'll take issue with Michael on one thing. I hope we don't see anything like this again in our lifetimes, but there will be another virus get out there, or the likelihood of it, and I do think that nationally we have to be better prepared than we were at the beginning of this. All governments at all levels responded extraordinarily well to what the confrontation we faced. We're very fortunate to be an island, but that may make things easier. But I do think that I hope there are policy lessons learned from this, that we do create the infrastructure that we need so that should this happen again with another virus, we are just a bit better prepared so that we can be a bit more proactive than reactive.
Yeah, well, when you add in, I suppose, what's happening with, well, what did happen with the bushfires, climate preparation virus, and China trade has been a big year on that front. It sounds like one of you has a visitor, so we better leave it there. It's been a pleasure this year, Jim and Michael, so enjoy your breaks. We'll talk next year. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Jim.